Hello dear students, welcome back to the history session, that is Maharashtra State Board 9th standard with political science, the first chapter, post World War political developments. Through this chapter we shall learn about India's relation with the world and some major global issues. Let us see chapter. We are dependent on different persons, institutions and organizations in the society. As we are dependent, our social life is interdependent about it has important place in it. Yes, of course, it is very true about the individuals and the society also. It applies like many independent nations in the world like India have been dependent upon the other big and small nations. As we carried some of the exchange and interaction which goes between the nations constantly. And these independent states also enters into the treaties with each other. Agreements with each other. These independent sovereign states comes up and we call it as international system, and this system is also known as the today's global system. So let us understand some of the features of the international system. Among that, first one is interdependence. Now all the countries of the world are dependent on each other for one or other reason. However, the big, prosperous, rich, developed, undeveloped, small countries may be. Each country is not self-sufficient and self-reliant about its needs, requirements and the facility. Even there are the big nations have to depend upon other big and small nations, and hence we could say interdependence is an important feature of the international system which we call today's global system. It relates with the international relations with the foreign policy. Now every nation has its policies about its internal dealings. So the internal dealings of a particular nation with the world is known as the foreign policy of the particular nation. And such a relations has to develop by the country to country by expanding its trade and import and export, the business, the factories, etc. So as per this, we have the background of the world. So let us see the background. Now as for the background, we could say the world in which we live today has been shaped through many events and developments and the reforms and the changes. And therefore, we need to go back to see history in order to understand today's world. And we know that 2 world wars were fought in the last century, in the last decade, and these were the most important events in the world history in the last century, which made the world completely changed because of these 2 events. And the new currents of thoughts emerged and developed. So let us understand what else happened due to these world wars. So respectively the First World War and the Second World War. So let us see the First World War. First World War fought between the 1914 to 1918. You can see the First World War is fought between 1914 to 1918. As per this war was fought, number of the major countries of Europe took part in it, because Europe had a very central place in the international or global system at that time. The war caused a tremendous loss of life and property. Then the countries which joined the war suffered tremendous economical losses Even the countries which did not join the war were impacted, influenced by the war. The economic of the victorious as well as the losing countries collapsed due to the First World War. Now the countries which were involved into the First World War, there were Allied powers and the Central powers. In the Allied powers we can say that Britain, France, Russia, Italy, America, and in the Central power the Germany, Austria, Hungary, Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. These two groups were involved in the First World War as the opponents of each other. And at the end of the First World War, all the nations, means the Allied powers and the Central powers, all the nations in the world, they felt that such a destructive war should not happen again. It should not emerge again, and for that purpose some measures need to be taken to achieve the end of the war. And to avoid these conflicts, an international organization, it was established under the name League of Nations. So the League of Nations, it was established out of this thinking. The League of Nations, it became an important platform to solve the international disputes, as we could say it carry out the negotiations, discussions, or we can say the conferences and talks, etc., or agreements, etc. The main responsibility of the League of Nations was to avoid war and to establish peace and security in the world. The League of Nations has understood to be to avoid war by establishing peace in the countries. After the First World War, we can say that major changes had been taken into the Europe. Not only the Europe, but outside of the Europe, we could see the major changes about to be taken place. For example, earlier empires in the Europe collapsed and the new place has been taken with the new nations came into being into the Europe and outside of the Europe. Now many European countries, they had their colonies in the countries of Africa and the Asia. Now the movements for the independence started in these colonies. These movements challenged the authority, leadership as well as the mastery of the European countries, as we could say their over-dominance over the nations. And as League of Nations was established to avoid the war after the First World War, to maintain the peace, the motto, the purpose did not succeeded as to preventing of the wars. And there were autocratic regimes which took place in number of the places, which came up in Germany, Italy and the Spanish. And the other countries, they have to be faced the number of the quarrels, disputes, oppressive statements of the nations. As a result, all these developments culminated into the Second World War. Over-dominance of the countries, it resulted into the Second World War. Now let us see the Second World War. Second World War, it was fought between the year 1939 to 1945. Second World War. And as this war is concerned, it proved to be far more destructive than the First World War. Not only the war, it was more destructive, but the weapons, missiles, what it were used in the Second World War were all technologically modern, and the war was widespread compared to the First World War. So as we can see, there were more advanced technology was employed in this war. The countries which took part in the Second World War, once again they faced a situation of economic crisis into their nations. Okay, now the countries which were participated and involved into the Second World War as Allied powers and the Axis power. In the Allied powers, we could say that Britain, France, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, Soviet Union, China and America. As compared to the Axis powers were Germany, Japan and Italy. These all were the countries involved in the Second World War. Now as the Second World War started, America played a major role in the Second World War. As compared to the First World War, Europe played a central role. Now America played a major or the central role in the Second World War. It had, America had manufactured nuclear weapons, new missiles, okay, in order to end the war. And as a result, the America dropped 2 nuclear weapons on the 2 cities of Japan, that is Hiroshima and Nagasaki, on 6th and 9th of August 1945 respectively. And the Second World War ended with the defeat of Germany into the Europe and the defeat of Japan into the Asia. Among the many countries, many events took place in the world after the Second World War, and the 1945 to 1991, 1945 to 1991, you can say the Cold War began. Then the Cold War started from 1945 to 1991, and this was long period of the Cold War. So we say that near 40 to 45 years has been longer to complete this war as the Cold War. So dear students, in the next video class we gonna see that is what is Cold War and the effects of Cold War. So then have a nice day and take care and thank you.